Good afternoon to you, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. Here, Saturday, June 9th, and I have a terrible head cold, so I'm going to talk kind of quiet. I got a lot to cover, but I don't want to talk too much. Does that make sense? So bear with me as I get through this. It's extremely aggravating, and that's all it is. It's very aggravating. I'm not like Ferris Bueller where, he's dying, save him. It's not like that. But it's frickin' aggravating. I'd much rather have a nail sticking through my foot than have to deal with this because it's aggravating. It slows me down. All right, I'm talking too much as it is. Hey, look, nice global shot, beautiful planet. Let's zoom in on it if we can, and we can take a look at the tropics. There is Aletta weakening. This will be bud before too long. This is the subject, somewhat, of much controversy, which we'll get to in a minute. And this is some very strong Saharan air influence coming off the coast of Africa. And if we zoom back out, you get the big picture. Look down here in the southern hemisphere, pretty strong storm systems. And some of that energy has actually translated into some swell activity that's going to cross the equator and head into Southern California, believe it or not. I noticed that on one of the forecast discussions when I was looking for some information for out west. Anyway, so in the Atlantic, nothing to speak of at the moment. We'll come back to this in a few moments as well. In the Pacific, Aletta still a hurricane, but I don't think it is anymore personally. Looking at the track real quick, it'll die a fairly quick death and dissipate over the cooler, more stable air mass and water of the eastern Pacific. And then we have this system, Invest Area 92P, or EP, Eastern Pacific 92E, and this is well on its way to becoming bud. And I thought I had there we go, close-up satellite shot. It's definitely on its way, and an advisory is probably initiated later today. Let's get rid of some of these tabs. So here's a infrared satellite shot of Aletta. Strong southerly winds shearing the system from south to north, while the low-level flow is pushing it to the west. And that's that shearing action, and that won't help the system at all. So Aletta will be in the history books as a Category 4 fairly early for the season out there, but not completely unprecedented. And then we'll watch and see what happens over the coming days again here with what will be Tropical Storm Bud before you know it, and eventually, more than likely, a hurricane. And the track for Bud may be getting closer to the Baja over here, so you folks down there are going to want to monitor this. And again, it's not for the fear of a hurricane coming your way and hurricane conditions, but certainly an increase in moisture, swells coming in, and other impacts. It's kind of early in the season to be thinking about hurricane threats directly to the Baja. That usually happens in August and September. Intensity-wise, it should become a hurricane, and as it gets close to that area of the southern Baja Peninsula, we can put this into motion, and I can show you the next, I think it's 5 days. There's Aletta there dying out. Here's Bud. So let's circle that in yellow. Watch what this does here. Coming up closer and closer to the Baja over time. There's the Baja Peninsula right there. Southern California, there's Arizona. So this comes up much closer to land, and the pattern's going to change. You got this big high pressure anchored here. Trough's going to dig in over the west, and some of this moisture is going to get pulled north, stripped away from the energy of Bud to be. And we go to that last frame. There it is, day 5, sitting off the coast, comfortably away from Baja. But there's Arizona and northwest Mexico too. Excuse me. So hey, you know what? Let me get some water. It's time for a water break. We're halfway through. Love my Fiji water. All right. So I think Bud is going to be a fairly decent moisture transport mechanism for the southwest United States, and that could cause some problems. You get high base thunderstorms that'll create lightning, not much rain in some cases, and you can have wildfires start. and it's kind of an early start to what they call their monsoon. And in fact, because I'm really interested in that, and it's probably a little too early to be thinking about going out there. I think August and September I may look at that. But I pulled this up from the forecast discussion out of Phoenix, and it's coming. Looks like some moisture, increasing thunderstorm activity across Arizona. But then this second paragraph here is what I found the most fascinating, and that's where they talk about the possibility of moisture from a remnant tropical system, and of course that would be bud, later next week. So you folks in the southwest, Tucson, Phoenix, eastern Arizona, high elevations, low elevations, maybe a reduction in temperatures, which is good, but an increase in moisture, which is also good if you can get it to not fall in heavy amounts. And you see right here they're talking about some of the precipitable water, the PW values of more than an inch and a quarter of rain. And that's getting up there towards the top of climatology. All right, so I will be focusing on this more and more, probably address it again on Monday. And we can see that reflected to some extent, moisture increase here in the southwest U.S. All this is related to fronts and juicy air masses. No tropical influences for the U.S. Southeast coast just yet. And I say just yet because you never know. So it's hard to say. These new GOES images are nice, but the background is harder than ever to see. Your outlines of the land masses. All right, here's Florida, eastern North America, etc. And I know it's hard to say etc. when you have a cold like this. So forgive me, Peter, in Canada. It's a long-standing joke. There's South America, and somewhere buried in here is Costa Rica and Panama. And that's where this big, I guess it kind of goes through this blob here, but that's where this big area of convection has developed. Probably not going to amount to much. It's just an active intertropical convergence zone, mainly over here in the eastern Pacific, whereas out here, this is all dominated by dust, stable conditions, and a suppressed intertropical convergence zone. But the GFS is very, very persistent and consistent in suggesting that energy comes out of here and starts to get together somewhere in the Gulf of Honduras and develop into something that would pose a problem for next weekend. You've probably seen it on social media by now, people posting still shots from model runs showing hurricanes parked in coastal Texas, coastal Louisiana, whatever. And, there's a lot of folks that get upset about that and don't think that it should be shared. And I understand that. But you know what? At the very least, it gets people to pay attention. Now, I don't like it, of course, when someone posts a picture like that and the headline is hurricane threat for Texas next week, ? That's to get clicks and likes and shares and whatever. But that notwithstanding, sort of that fear-mongering proliferation of those images, the one good thing about having access to that is it reminds people that we are in hurricane season. But that being said, you need somebody that can explain it, and you don't want to just scare people. There's a lot of folks over here in Texas, especially from the rain event from Harvey, that honestly it's like PTSD, and they don't need that. This sort of a hurricane could be coming in 8 days. So yeah, it's problematic. So I want to explain it from a more rational point of view here. There's very little in the way of energy coming out of the deep tropics to fuel anything. In other words, the antecedent seedling, the genesis, where does it come from? Hurricanes don't just pop up out of nowhere. So where does it come from? Well, there's really not much there to seed this. First of all, this area is not particularly ripe. Maybe a little bit more energy coming in after bud moves out of the picture, but that's probably going to be more towards the western Gulf and a Bay of Campeche situation. So, we look out towards Africa, this is all dry, so there's no real strong tropical wave activity. So then we go look at the operational GFS, and we can try to pick out why is it showing this. So this is the initial map. 5,000 feet up, there's the outline of our very solid ridge, which extends well west. Very dominant, strong southerly flow here over out of the Gulf. So moist, hot in some places, moist in others, in a combination of the two. And then all these different blobs you see are areas of vorticity. There's the makings of bud right there. And these are your strong trade winds kind of screaming through the Caribbean Sea. No perturbations or areas where you see a tropical wave coming through, where you see these trade winds kind of bending, and like that. And you'll see when it happens later in the year, and we get these tropical waves. There's just not anything really there. So if we put this into motion, watch what happens with the GFS. It develops bud quickly in the East Pac. And you notice down here still this straight line east to west trade wind action. Then it kind of shifts southeast to northwest. And then just kind of out of nowhere, by about days 3, 4, and 5, right there, Honduras, Nicaragua, energy just pops up. Almost like this little Central American gyre tries to come back. And by day 5, it's still parked over the Yucatan. So I read around at some of the forecast discussions along the Gulf Coast, and they acknowledge it from these Weather Service offices. Yep, the GFS for 12 runs in a row is insisting on something developing and trying to come up somewhere around here. But they discount it, and that's important. Okay, I'm a geographer, and I study hurricanes when they make landfall. I'm not a meteorologist who studies this stuff from an analytical, physical point of view like these folks do at the Weather Service or the Hurricane Center. They're not worried about it, so we shouldn't be worried about it, honestly. And I like to put equipment out in the front of these things when they make landfall to study what they do. That's where it ends for me. I realize how much damage they cause and how much angst they create. So when I use this word excited, you know what I mean. It's the excitement of putting technology to use when they happen, and this isn't even getting me excited, so to speak. And you know what I mean when I use that word. It's not disrespectful at all. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think there is a chance that something is going to try to develop in this area before the end of the month, because it's going to shift to a more favorable pattern overall. But this high pressure area is really strong. This is the lower levels of the atmosphere. It extends high up. It's very thick. And so getting something to come up into the northern Gulf, it just doesn't seem plausible. Does that mean it won't happen? You remember, we never say never, but jumping on and even looking at a 7 and 8 day forecast, the global forecast system is having some problems overdoing these systems, and it's a common theme for this area, for this time of year. And that's my signal to try to wrap things up. So don't worry about it too much. That's the thing. We can watch it together. There are other people on Twitter, elsewhere on social media that you can follow. And when we sniff something out that seems more real than model feedback and over-aggression and development or whatever, we're going to let you know. So relax, especially you good people along the coastal Texas area and inland Houston. Hey, don't sweat it. Well, you're going to be sweating it because it's hot out there, but don't worry about this. All right? We'll have plenty of time if something pops up. Whenever, between now and the end of November, we'll be on top of it. All right? Well, I made it through. I know my voice sounds just horrible. I couldn't even do it yesterday. I tried, and it was just miserable. I was like, there's no way. So I took yesterday off. But I'm on the upswing. Things will be better by tomorrow. And then Monday, when we go over a lot of stuff, I should be back to normal. Have a good rest of your Saturday. I'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Mark Suddeth, HurricaneTrack.com, and we shall chat again tomorrow.